Hey everybody, my name is Jim Farmer. I'm the festival director of Out on Film, Atlanta's LGBTQ film festival. We're just wrapping up our 35th anniversary festival, and this year's been amazing. The programming has been well liked, crowds have been great. We've had a lot of filmmakers, so thank you all for making that happen. Short films are always something that we love programming. One of our most popular programs this year has been Animation Explosion, which screened last Thursday, September 29th, and now it's streaming through October 9th. So a lot of people have watched online as well and love the program. So we have one of the filmmakers here today. We have Amir Ovadia Steklov, who has directed By the Way. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for selecting my film and showing it. And thanks for all the audience that watched it.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much. It's been very popular. Well, just tell me a little bit about making the film. I mean, and how personal of a story this was for you.
So obviously it's a very personal story because
Yeah.
I tell my personal journey as a bisexual cis man. But also I try to use the personal story to tell a wider story, a global story.
Yeah.
So I kind of try to distance myself from making it too personal.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I had a lot of limitations when making the film because I had just a very tiny budget.
Yeah.
And I was also very time limited. I had only like a month to work on it. So I couldn't really, think too much or dive into too many emotions. I wrote the screenplay and then I start doing the animation very quickly. And I found this way, it's a very good practice, I think, when dealing with very personal topics, because you can distance yourself and focus on producing. So this is how I did it.
Did you always know that this was going to be an animated piece?
Yeah, because I pitched it as an animation to the fund that gave me the grant to make the film. So it was an animation concept from the beginning.
Is animation a field that you work a lot in, or was this your first foray into animation?
So my journey in animation starts at a very young age, actually. Already in kindergarten, I started experimenting with stop motion. Yeah. And my first animation film was done when I was 19 years old. That got me into film school, actually. And from film school onward, I was focused on live action. Mm-hmm. But because of the pandemic, it was very hard to go out with a crew and have a set and do a film production. So I decided to go back to my roots and doing animation again. And I have a studio here in Berlin where I live, and I just set up the animation studio and did it all by myself. So you can say that the film is very much a product of the pandemic.
Exactly. So can you talk a little bit about your festival run and where all you played, where you're going to be playing in the future, and what it's like to get the film out there in the world again and see the film with an audience?
Yeah, so I'm very glad that the pandemic is getting behind us and I can travel with my film, because with my previous film I couldn't travel. The film was traveling, but I couldn't travel with it. And now I can, and I'm very happy about it. Mm-hmm. I premiered at Frameline in San Francisco. Yes. Later I showed in Outfest in Los Angeles. 2 weeks ago, actually, I went to Seoul in Korea, and I was invited to show it in a big animation festival over there. Soon I'm going to have the Berlin premiere in my hometown, and later I'm going to go to Tel Aviv to show it. So I'm very happy because it's getting very, it's rolling into the film circuit, and I'm very happy about it.
Great. I mean, can you talk a little bit about representation and, why it matters, why it's important to have, queer directors telling queer stories, and more importantly, having positive portrayals of the LGBTQ experience?
That's a good question. Well, I used to do a lot of dark horror, psychological thrillers kind of films. Yeah. I was in the dark for a long time, and in recent years I discovered comedy.
Yeah.
And I think that what comedy gives you is an opportunity to connect with an audience on a deeper level.
Yeah.
Like entertainment is very important when making films, especially when you try to do something with a big theme. You try, like, this film is kind of an activist act to shed light upon bisexual and non-binary sexual orientations.
Mhm.
And I use that the language of comedy to connect with the audience. You
Yeah.
know, if the audience laugh and they enjoy the film, you can start. They can start trusting you. You know, and after they trust you and they enjoy the film, you can start like inject some messages,
Great.
which is very effective. It's much more effective than doing psychological thrillers, for example, like I did before.
Exactly. And we have another guest. We have Carrie Hawks. How you doing?
Okay, how are you?
Good. Thanks for joining us. We're doing a quick talk this morning as part of our Animation Explosion programming. Carrie Hawks is the creator of the wonderful Inner Wound Reel. Thanks for joining us, Carrie. How did the film come up?
Let's see. I had made another documentary that briefly touched on self-harm.
Yeah.
And one thing I noticed was people would only talk to me one-on-one during Q&As about that because there's a lot of stigma around that. So I wanted to make a film that was just really concentrating on different people's stories and experiences with that. So that people who don't do that could understand a little bit more, and people who do engage in self-harm could know that they're not alone and see how other people coped.
I was talking to Amir earlier about his film. I mean, Carrie, how important was it to tell this story? I mean, was there an inspiration, or how personal was this project?
Well, because I've also dealt with self-harm in my past,
Yeah.
I had that very personal connection, and
Yeah.
then I didn't feel I've become way more comfortable talking to people about it myself. But even when I bring up the film idea to people, sometimes people would like jump back or be like, oh, well, certain people don't do that, but like, or like Black people don't do that, or anything. And it's really something that goes across all backgrounds, but it's actually very much more prevalent among the LGBTQIA plus community.
Yeah.
So it's something that I felt was really needed to be talked about. And I wanted to do it in a way where you're not seeing traumatic things happen again, but you're more thinking about people's experiences and their emotions.
I was talking to Amir earlier about this program, Animation Explosion. It was very well received when we screened it in person last week, and also been very well received as part of our streaming. Can you talk about animation and how you get interested in animation and why you enjoy the medium?
Well, I love animation because anything can happen, and you can really just show the inner workings of your mind out on a screen.
Yeah.
I got into it. I made my first documentary in 2012. I shot this interview, and it was horrible lighting and horrible sound. And I was trying to find a way to salvage it. And then I was like, oh, if I rotoscope it, then you're really going to focus more on the person. And I do have a background in graphic design, and I'd learned some motion graphics when I was in school at Georgia State, actually, but I wasn't. Yay, Georgia State. I felt like I wasn't qualified, or I couldn't do animation on my own, but then I started learning more through the internet and through trial and error and through stop motion, and just really fell in love with it as a way that's just like magic to like bring things to life, or to show a world that only exists in your mind.
Sure. As you joined, I was asking Amir the same question. Carrie, can you talk about representation, why it matters to have queer directors telling stories like this, and why it's important to get these stories out there into the world?
Oh yeah, I think I didn't have a lot of this when I was younger, and I think it really would have helped. And also, I don't know, seeing the world told from many different backgrounds. Like I grew up identifying with a lot of films that like I wasn't necessarily in. But then I remember when I saw, I think it was one of the first episodes of Sense8, and I was like, oh, they're having sex the way I have sex. It was just like this kind of affirming, like, oh, other people do the thing that I do. But I hadn't seen it out before. So then it just made me a little more comfortable with myself. And I think if we're going to be a good and an interesting world, just having different stories from several other people is just, it's more interesting, it's more fascinating, it's more honest, and it's just a better way to be.
Nice. Final question for both of you. What's next for you personally and what's next for your films? We'll start with Amir.
What next for me personally? I don't know, just like surviving the next day. And with my films, I'm working on a feature film right now, which is
Nice.
yeah, it's an apocalyptic love story between a food blogger and the leader of North Korea,
Oh, wow.
and it's based on a true story.
Have you started it yet? Or are you still in development?
I'm still developing it.
Okay.
Also, before we say goodbye, I want to show those two characters from my film.
Like,
I always like to show that in Q&As.
that is amazing. Thank you so much.
That's so cool. I loved your film.
Thank you.
And Carrie, what's next for you and what's next for your film?
For me, well, I just started teaching at Parsons, so I am gonna figure out how to be the best professor I can be. I have an idea for a film about a vampire slug, and I'm still working on that, and it'll be a short. And for the film, it is screening, I think, in Ireland today, and it'll be screening at New Orleans Film Festival in November, and Cucaloris also in November. And I'm going to be doing a mental health screening workshop with a high school in New Jersey in January.
That is great. Thank you both so much. Okay, the program is Animation Explosion. Again, it's screened in person as part of Island Film on Thursday, September the 29th. It's now streaming through October 9th. If you missed it, shame on you, but you have a chance to see it again. It is a tremendous program. The scores have been very, very high for everybody who's seen it. Carrie, Amir, thank you both for making these films. Thanks for sharing them with the Island Film audience. And thank you for taking the time to talk to us today.
Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. We'll talk to y'all soon.
All right. Bye.
Thanks so much.